Coming up, we speak to political analyst Sandile Swana on the two-day cabinet lekgotla that took place this week, as well as other political issues. Well, the presidency has described the almost R1 billion proposed deal by South African Tourism for English Premier League team Tottenham Hotspur as unjustifiable. A very good afternoon. If you've just joined us, we're live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. You are watching The Week in Review. It's a program where we take a look at some of the big stories that has come out of the week, perhaps making headlines and, as always, getting South Africans talking. I'm your host, Liesl Wilson. Let's get straight into it. Right, so first up, the ANC says it will appeal the decision of the High Court in Johannesburg, which ordered the governing party to hand over records of its cadre deployment committee to the Democratic Alliance. Now, on Thursday, the court ruled that it was unlawful for the ANC to refuse to make public the records dating back to 2013, when party president Cyril Ramaphosa was made a deployment committee chairperson. Last week, lawyers for the DA argued that the ANC's deployment policy was unconstitutional and asked the court to declare it invalid. The main opposition is of the view that this policy is the root cause of problems in the delivery of basic services, including electricity. But the ANC said the committee's recommendations relating to public service and state-owned enterprise positions were not binding on government ministers, premiers, or even mayors. Meanwhile, in other political news, the NFP's Sandile Swana has been voted in as deputy mayor of the eThekwini Metro in KwaZulu-Natal. This took place in a council meeting at the Nkosi Albert Lutulu International Convention Centre in Durban. The position became vacant after ANC councillors voted to remove their alliance partner Philani Mavundla of the Abantu Batu Congress in November. Samkelesiwe Shange is now the new whip of the council. Meanwhile, a motion of no confidence against eThekwini Mayor Polisi Kaunda has also failed. The motion was put forth by Councillor Imtiaz Syed of the Active Citizens Coalition. The ANC, supported by the EFF and other minority parties, received a total of 126 votes in the 222-seat council. Now, while the DA, the IFP and other smaller parties had 81 votes, the ANC managed to retain power in the Metro with the help of a coalition of smaller parties after the 2021 local government elections. As we take a look at politics in other provinces, now angry opposition parties at Kimberley's Solplaiki municipality staged a walkout from a council meeting. The meeting collapsed following disagreements over a candidate who is supposed to oversee the infrastructure budget of over R2 billion. Parties are unhappy about the name of one of the two nominees proposed for the position of Director of Infrastructure. They accuse the council speaker, Nomazizi Maputle, of wanting to use the ANC majority to bring in their preferred person.
Opposition party members in the Solplaiki municipality have accused the council speaker of deliberately collapsing the meeting. They decided to stage a walkout after they were allegedly denied an opportunity to deliberate on the qualifications of two candidates. The two are earmarked for the position that will deal with critical issues around water infrastructure.
We expected council to make a decision to appoint an acting director who has the knowledge and the skills, the required legal skills, to be able to implement the strategies that are needed to guarantee us the quality of water that we so much need.
The speaker is biased. The speaker collapsed the council because he changed a resolution of the council. The council resolved that we are going to bring in two names and compare their qualifications. Only to find out when council resumed again after the caucus, the speaker had another idea to say we must go straight to voting.
Opposition parties accuse the municipality of trying to bring an unqualified candidate. The parties have threatened legal action if the decision is pushed through.
The director that needs to take care of the people in Kimberley is simply being appointed. We do not know if he has the right qualifications. We do not know if this guy will make a difference, and he has the right to sign contracts worth literally billions of rand.
We cannot agree with that, that somebody who is not qualified to be put in a responsibility, a dire responsibility, because we have water crisis, we have an ailing infrastructure. that is succumbing to age.
Efforts to get a comment from the Speaker's office were unsuccessful. The Salt Lake municipality has accused the EFF of misleading the public. Tabiso Khadebe, SABC News, Kimberley.
Meanwhile, national elections are fast approaching and concerns still remain on whether voter turnout will increase. It comes as some South Africans keep raising concerns of poor service delivery, high unemployment and the high cost of living. Many say that political parties are also visible during elections when they campaign but disappear post-election.
The 2019 national elections have long passed. Now in 2024, the voters will have to go to the polls again. This means, in no time, various political parties will hit the streets in many parts of the country, gunning for the hearts and minds of South Africans. But unlike years before, this time around, political parties will have to unleash something special to try and win them over, to give them a chance. Next year's general elections come at the backdrop of many challenges facing the country, from unemployment, high cost of living, and the stubborn energy crisis.
Next year there will be elections. You will start seeing many political parties where we stay going to each and every door campaigning. After we vote, they disappear.
Now we don't see them. We only see them when it's time to vote because they want our votes.
Personally, I don't trust any political party, no matter which one. I just don't trust them. I am personally tired of empty promises.
2024 national elections will be the country's 7th in this democratic dispensation, and coalition government remains on the tongues of many. But with it, it brings its own challenges. Political parties working together seemingly for the sake of the people or not. Now as the country gets ready, some South Africans accuse political parties of just caring about power.
I just don't trust political parties. We are sitting here without jobs. I don't trust them anymore.
Meanwhile, political analyst Mcebisi Ntlejana says, amongst the challenges political parties are facing is patronage, and that has affected them in the eyes of many.
It's more about the job than belief in the ideas and trying to change people's lives. The coalition politics really has been an ugly manifestation of that. So when that happens, then obviously it makes people disillusioned.
Now with coalitions proving to be a challenge at local government, political parties find themselves with the possibility to yet again work together, this time around at national level. Ntlanhla Khatlhane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, so the first biannual Cabinet Lekgotla, attended by ministers, deputy ministers and director generals, wrapped up on Friday. The Cabinet Lekgotla is hosted in an effort to set the tone for President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, which will be delivered next week, Thursday. Perhaps for this and more on Political Stories of the Week, we're joined by political analyst Sandile Swana. Very good afternoon to you, Sandile. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you, Rizal, and your viewers.
Let's look at what transpired this week, and with so many moving parts at this point, perhaps you could speak to us about the significance of the Cabinet Lekgotla ahead of SONA.
From a government point of view, the difficulty, of course, is that the same people who constitute the ANC conference, ANC January 8 statement, and eventually this State of the Nation address and the Lekgotla is the same people. But from your point of view and mine, we need to cut off and say, now we're dealing with the cabinet. Now we're dealing with the government, which is the state, not a political party. So that is the difference. These are the people who hold power, physically hold power, hold the monies of the state, the infrastructure of the state, Eskom, Transnet. they hold it, is in their hands. It's not in the hands of the political party. So anything that they want to change in South Africa or they want to achieve, they've got the means with which to achieve it. So that is the significance of the Lekgotla. Whatever has been verbalized by the political party, this is the people, the cabinet, that is able to actually do it.
Sandile, speaking of power, perhaps even attendance, how is the no-show of the Deputy President, Didi Mabuza, at this point being viewed in the world of politics? Obviously, just because it is such a crucial meeting for government at this point, what's it also indicative of? How would you unpack that?
Obviously, from what I read, he has submitted an apology. However, Didi Mabuza has been missing in action for quite some time. On top of that, he has been losing his political base of support in Mpumalanga, and that was fully demonstrated in the Nazareth conference during December and January this year. He has lost support. So he is an entity that is floating around with the ANC, in the ANC without any roots and no power to back him up. And that makes him very vulnerable to be replaced by Paul Mashatile on very short notice. So if you're reading the political climate, you would say that indeed Didi Mabuza is headed for the hills.
Speaking of which, by virtue of this, one has to question, the talks, the murmurs about this cabinet reshuffle that seems to rather been imminent since the beginning of the year. And we're still awaiting that to happen. But my question to you is this going to then be a major or a minor cabinet reshuffle, just taking into all the considerations as we approach 2024?
It is likely to be a major cabinet reshuffle, and there are several factors that are relevant. One of them is that there are significant changes of so-called veterans of the ANC who've been left out of the Cyril Ramaphosa slate. They said they forgot their names, but they left them out in any case. And then there are newer faces that are coming in. So we expect those people to come in. The other most decisive factor in all of this is that the ANC has almost 15 years of solid non-performance and an assortment of disasters and crises and major failures. So you need people who are new, who are diligent, who are intelligent, and who are honest to be reintroduced into the cabinet so that they can pick up where they left off in 2008, which was the last year where the ANC showed anything that can be called performance at all.
Sandile, who would some of those people be? We've heard the likes of Paul Mashatile being sworn in on Monday, amongst others. When you speak about the shake-up that's needed, the work that needs to be done, who are some of those people that stand out at this point?
I think that obviously there would be rumors that people like Sihle Zikalala would come in. The part of who is coming in is a little bit tricky. The part of the people perhaps that are under pressure to go out would be the one that we can talk about. Certainly Lindwe Sisulu has got political pressure to come out. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma has got pressure to come out. Pravin Gordhan has got pressure to come out. Gwede Mantashe has got pressure to come out, but he's politically very strong. I don't know if they'll have enough force to push him out. I doubt it. So there are a number of people living in your visuals there whose performance has been mediocre, the likes of Blade Nzimande and many others. Njimutsecha has been there for a very, very long time. But you've seen that our learners in many international reports, we tend to come number last in terms of learning from reading for meaning and in mathematical subjects and so on. Black students, African learners and colored learners in particular, are nowhere in the educational arena. So those are some of the people who've been there. But the energy sector, the transport sector, the jobs sector, the labor sector, as well as the education sector, those are sectors that need attention. The economic cluster needs attention. Patel, some have praised him in that economic development cluster, but our actual economic development has been probably 1/3 of the number that it should be. If you look at the GDP growth rate, we're supposed to be at 5.4. We are struggling to get anywhere near 1.8 or 2%. So those are the people who are going to be under pressure.
Speaking of the work that needs to be done, some of the topics that top the agenda at the Lekgotla included looking at the state of disaster with the ongoing power crisis in the country. We're also seeing the failing infrastructure, amongst many other issues. We're obviously also seeing the proposition of a national state of disaster with regards to the energy crisis. And how would you weigh in on that? What are the criticisms and concerns about that declaration? Many have also come out to say that we should be asking whether the ANC itself is rather in a state of disaster.
The last part of your question is a given. The answer is a given. The ANC is in a state of disaster. It is a disaster in itself. So coming to the issue of what must be done to solve the Eskom crisis, the electricity supply crisis in South Africa, the Eskom system operator has shown us that we are going to be short of electricity between now and 2027. For the next 5 years, that's what they predicted. So if you take it from there, it's going to take you, if you are working extraordinarily hard, 2 years to 36 months to stabilize that situation. Now, the state of disaster has got to deal with some elements that are straightforward but politically very contentious. If you declare a state of disaster, it should simply be to remove the middleman, because between the original equipment manufacturers who supply parts for power stations to Eskom, these are overseas-based companies, comrades have installed middlemen companies. They buy from these companies and they sell to Eskom. So you need to remove that middle layer so that Eskom buys directly from the manufacturer. Two, in the state of disaster, to the extent that you declare it, the Chief Procurement Office of South Africa needs to do a proper audit, and they can do it very quickly. They are experienced in it. They've done some of this work to know the price of everything ahead of time and the correct suppliers of everything, because all the prices at Eskom are wrong. They buy everything wrong, and that is one of the failures why our money has disappeared and we get nothing. For instance, the power stations they were building, the budgets are 3 times the cost. We could have gotten 6 power stations with the money that has been wasted so far in Kusile and Medupi. So those are some of the issues that need to be there, and also a relaxation to allow all sorts of private sector companies to build their own power stations of various kinds, whatever you call it, to generate their own electricity, because we need to increase our economic growth rate, the GDP growth rate, by 300%. So there's no need to say there's no space for anyone. Eskom is budgeting for 1.9% GDP growth. So the other 4% can be taken by the private sector and just do business.
There's lots of chess moves that are happening at this point to obviously see who's going to come out top, perhaps also employ their power, perhaps also how this is going to impact the people at large, because that is the concern at this point. Another issue that came out this week, though, was the DA winning the cater deployment case against the ANC for now. And when we look at the policy and how it initially came about, perhaps you can contextualize that for us. Also, how it played itself out. And really just given the state of affairs, in terms of corruption and maladministration, how is this going to solve the problem? Is it going to solve the problem? How would you weigh in on that?
Yes, the issue of cater deployment in South Africa is old. The ANC did not invent anything. The Broederbond and the National Party exercised a cater deployment. Any clerk, any job that was available in the public sector, in any university, everywhere, they tried, in the church, even everywhere in society. The Broederbond wanted to put their own people there. White people were in support of the Broederbond, and remove those who were not in support of the Broederbond. But what we do know about that is that the whole program that they were busy with was apartheid, a crime against humanity. It was a criminal program. Now, the ANC copied that idea as well to say that the staff of the state, CEOs of state-owned entities, all sorts of positions, positions in municipalities, even low-level positions, will be allocated by the ANC everywhere. That is what they were doing. In the process of that, criminal syndicates run by ANC leaders for private benefit and for the benefit of the ANC were unleashed. And that caused what is called state capture and the collapse of state services. Originally, they thought that the only thing that's going to be done by cadre deployment is to appoint dedicated cadres of the spirit of Oliver Tambo who are going to accelerate development and the benefit for everybody. But instead, it was so easy for criminals of various kinds who are in cabinet, some of them as we speak, some are in the NEC and in various parts of the ANC, ran criminal syndicates and made sure that Eskom is bankrupt, Transnet is bankrupt, every company is emptied of cash, every state department is emptied of cash. That is what it has done. There's also parts of this that are worrying. There's a list of what I think they call centers of power or levers of power that must be controlled. For instance, they wanted to appoint judges, they wanted to appoint university principals, and so on. So the whole thought process of South Africa would have been controlled by cadres of the ANC. And unfortunately, since the 1990s, the average cadre of the ANC was either a careerist, an opportunist, or a criminal. These were not people of the order of Oliver Tambo. They are ANC only in uniform. The ANC exists as the learned Judge Dikgang Mseneke said, the revolution has failed. So the people we see who say they represent the ANC today, they are not even ANC. Tambo would not be able to recognize them. So that is what has actually happened. Initially, they thought they were going to infuse the ideology of the ANC in every part of the state. And they have failed in that. Instead, they created a large criminal enterprise.
Sandile, I know that the ANC is appealing that ruling. And, you know, the debate about whether the cadre deployment policy was a product of democratic centralization or it, you know, became a recipe for constitutional crisis. We're looking at the ripple effects to date, and one can then only judge as a result of that. So perhaps as that's also unfolding, let's flip the coin and also look at, with the DA's High Court win to date, what are some of the dangers and limits of this win to abolish cadre deployment? How could it also backfire for the DA and other parties?
At this stage, we are not yet talking about the abolition of cadre deployment. What we are talking about is that the victory says everybody who is appointed in the state. So let's say you are appointed as a clerk somewhere or as a CEO of a state-owned company or a DDG or a DG. All the activities, documents, discussions that have happened around that must be transparent to the public. So nobody must pitch up at an office to come and start working in the state. And we, as the public, do not know how that person was selected and whether, in fact, that person was the best candidate for that job. So that's the part that the DA has won for now. And that part, interestingly, is the part where Cyril Ramaphosa himself, in the Zondo Commission, had said it would be unreasonable for anyone to say that the proceedings of cadre deployment and how people are selected for positions in the state would be a secret. It must not be a secret. So the judge has confirmed something that the president of the ANC has agreed. And I would then assume that the DA and other political parties would want us to know that only the best people are being appointed to each position. And not only those, even if they are members of their parties, let's say the DA or the EFF or even the ANC, it's fine, but on the selection panel, they must have scored the highest marks. They must be the ones that are truly, truly the winners of that position. Just for the sake of clarity, there are records that people like Siyabonga Kama were appointed when they did not even pass the aptitude test for the position they were applying for. In other words, his level of natural intelligence was not enough for him to be appointed as a CEO in terms of the tests that were used. Brian Mulifi was appointed, but he was not the top candidate on the selection. He was appointed on the basis of phone calls from the deployment committee, which was run by Cyril Ramaphosa himself. So those are the things that we want to say the best South Africans, the most talented, the most capable, the most diligent and honest South Africans must be the ones who get jobs. And that must be done in a way that all of us can get the records of how the scoring was done, everything, how the people were actually appointed.
Sandile, let's continue to monitor the outcomes of that. We've run over time. We'll have to leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for weighing in on some of those top political stories. Sandile Swana is a political analyst. Really just wrapping up the Cabinet Lekgotla that wrapped up on Friday, and also taking a look at some of the other political stories that made headlines this week. Now, in other news, EFF leader Julius Malema is currently addressing party gathering in Kempton Park, which is just east of Gauteng. On that note, let's take you live there.
We're looking for the crook with the big nose this side. We want to remove him from our house because Matabandlovu and Union Building belong to the people of South Africa and must only be occupied by leadership that is ethical and respect its oath of office. Mara before the twalela mowe, kadi 20, renaro tagana le na kwa parlamenti. Do charana. Kadi 9 February. We are going to show him what we are made of there in Parliament. We will never be addressed by a constitutional delinquent. We will never be addressed by a criminal. We will never be addressed by a money launderer. The courts can protect him anyhow. But who will face him in Parliament? And there is no court that will protect him. We will be there and we are going to take him head on. And that is our relationship with him from now onwards. Everywhere where he goes, if you hear, mobilize the people to go and teach him a lesson. We must never find peace in South Africa for having violated his oath of office and violated our constitution. We have no respect for constitutional delinquents. We have dealt with one before. Yes. And they thought they were more powerful than this one. We cannot be threatened by an apartheid collaborator, by a man with no struggle credentials, by a man who has been adopted by white families, and that's where he got his accent from. Never will we be intimidated by someone who was deployed to destroy the liberation movement. That is his history. He can't dispute it. So if they allow him to buy them with money, he will never buy us with money. The EFF is not for sale. The EFF belongs to the rural township masses of our people. The EFF belongs to the poorest of the poor. The EFF belongs to the Africans and not to a pocket of an individual. Thank you.
All right, so those are live visuals coming through from Kempton Park in Johannesburg on the back of CIC, Julius Malema addressing EFF party members in Gauteng, addressing EFF members rather in Kempton Park. Some of the gathering structures there on the back of his address. We'll quickly take a quick ad break and continue with more news on the other side. All right, so welcome back. The Weekend Review continues. In other news, our Eskom has reduced rolling blackouts to stage 3 as of 5 a.m. this morning. The power utility says that it plans to further reduce blackouts during the weekend, where the power utility also says the return of several generating units to service and low weekend demand should allow it to continue to reduce power cuts. Meanwhile, oil company Petro SA has hit back at allegations that it is charging Eskom unfair prices for diesel. It says that a lack of proper planning and forecast are the main contributing factors to the high prices.
Media reports say that Petro SA is charging Eskom high prices for diesel. Eskom uses the diesel to power some of its power plants to help mitigate against load shedding. Last year, the power utility indicated that it has run out of money for diesel but had to source it to reduce load shedding. But Petro SA says it started to lose money due to lack of consistency in the quantity of diesel that Eskom requires, and that the last-minute request for diesel is contributing to the high prices it is charging Eskom.
Eskom comes in February, they require volumes within 48 hours. And if the markets are rising in the month of February, Petro SA cannot be in a position to sell to Eskom at M-1 because the real price is the spot price. So the market is such that it punishes you for not properly forecasting and planning.
The company says it has requested a 3-month forecast from Eskom on the supply requirements, but this did not materialize due to, among others, financial constraints. It says a forecast will enable it to source diesel economically and supply it at a better price to Eskom.
We had a meeting with Eskom after Petro SA has realized that over time, Petro SA was losing money. Remember that we're working in what we call a highly volatile market, especially after the Ukraine and the Russia situation. Markets started rising and rising and rising. So, prior to July, the supply was very constant. So Eskom was just lifting according to our planning. And then there's something changed in July. Burn rate of Eskom actually increased. So historically, we were supplying them with 1 million liters a day. So after July, that thing actually changed from 1 million liters a day to 3 million liters a day.
Petro SA says for it to offer better pricing and have constant supply, it needs to have long-term agreements with the refineries in the Middle East, and that this is likely to guarantee constant supply and better pricing for Eskom. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, Civil Action Organisation Outers written to Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu and the acting CEO of SA Tourism, Themba Khumalo, asking them to stop the Tottenham Hotspur deal. The organisation says that the size of the budget for the proposed deal, which is almost 1 billion rand, is unacceptable. It says initiatives to improve South Africa's tourism sector should shift to helping the industry recover rather than trying to advertise the country as the ideal tourism destination. Meanwhile, the presidency has described the almost 1 billion rand proposed deal by South African tourism for English Premier League team Tottenham Hotspur as unjustifiable, where on Thursday, Khumalo defended the deal. The deal sparked outrage from some sectors of society, believe the funds could have been channeled towards South Africa's socio-economic challenges. Also, spokesperson to the president, Vincent Mangwenya, weighs in on the matter.
The presidency has not been briefed on the reported sponsorship deal by South African tourism, nor is there any plan to include an announcement on this deal in the State of the Nation address. Even though we have not been briefed, we do not think that spending such an amount in this manner will be justifiable.
Tottenham Hotspur Football Club is said to be the 8th most valuable football brand in the world. Anyone partnering with the London team would have significant visibility across the globe. But plans for South African tourism to spend a near 1 billion rand on a deal with the club appear to be stalling, with the acting chief executive of the group saying conversations still need to take place with stakeholders. Tottenham Hotspur Football Club says it does not comment on commercial matters, but it appears President Cyril Ramaphosa has now flagged his scepticism about the arrangement. His spokesperson is reported to have said any speculation the president is supportive of the deal is not true, and that he would not support spending so much money in that manner. And it is that issue of spending that is the root of this backlash. South African tourism insists the money earmarked for the project could only be spent on tourism, that there's other money mandated to be spent on domestic issues like energy and infrastructure. The acting chief executive maintained that while a deal had not yet been signed, there was still an intention to do so. But with such a sensitive issue now catching the attention of the president, eyes will be on SA Tourism and Spurs to see if a deal can be done or if the backlash kills it off. Laura Makin-Isherwood, SABC News, London.
In other news, medical professionals in Kimberley in the Northern Cape say there has been an increase in cases related to the recent heatwave that hit the country. However, most of the cases were not fatal, but the World Health Organization says that more than 100,000 people have died from heat waves between 1998 and 2017. Meanwhile, 8 people in the Kakamas region in the Northern Cape died after suffering from heat strokes 2 weeks ago.
Periods of excessive heat that persist for 3 days or more. A study released by the South African Medical Research Council reveals that infants, the elderly, people with disabilities and pregnant women are most vulnerable to heat strokes. It's also believed that heat waves cause irritability, which leads to gender-based violence, among others.
We need to know how the environmental factors are affecting human health. I think it's very imperative to do those kinds of studies because create awareness and advise the government accordingly. It's an ongoing research, and it's been years, and it's different studies. It's not just one study, but at the end, we took years of research and put it together just to see what's been happening over the years.
Heat strokes come in 3 stages if it's not treated. Firstly, dehydration, then heat exhaustion, followed by a heat stroke. Precautionary measures for those outdoors need to be taken. So what exactly happened when you suffer a heat stroke? Let's have a look. Firstly, a file is opened at the hospital. After that, you are assessed. Depending on the assessment, you will either be transferred to a general unit or an emergency unit. If needs be, you will be hospitalized.
We have been seeing a lot more cases recently because of our heat stroke, because of the recent heat wave that's been happening. However, we haven't had extreme cases yet in our area. But the things that we would be looking out for is if somebody comes in and they are having a body temperature that's above 40 degrees, for example, when we measure it. People who may be presenting with neurological symptoms. So if they're coming in, they're confused.
The climate change bill before Parliament aims to develop an effective long-term climate change response.
If you look at our climate change and health adaptation plan, it's a plan that is led by the Department of Health, but you've got all other stakeholders involved, all departments, research institutions, institutions of higher learning, municipalities, provinces, and members of the organized structures of the community who are participating in these structures.
However, some say they were not consulted about the bill.
We missed the period for public participation. It wasn't advertised or nobody on the normal platforms that they use. So we couldn't participate and make them aware of these additional risks. But I've gone through it, and what I see, no, it's definitely not a good bill for us at the end of the day. It's not going to help. It's specific relation to cities and city folk.
Meanwhile, an investigation is currently underway into the deaths of 8 farm workers who died due to heat stroke in Kakamas 2 weeks ago. The Department of Labour says they need to handle the matter with sensitivity and will release a report on the findings. Reginald Witboy, SABC News, Kimberley.
Right, welcome back. In other news making headlines this week, scores of prospective UNISA students were left frustrated and inconvenienced on the last day of registration at the institution. It comes after student leaders shut down the Sunnyside campus, where they are demanding that registration be extended. UNISA has confirmed that engagements with student leaders to resolve the impasse are advancing.
A rocky start to the academic year at UNISA. Students left frustrated.
if they do not decide to extend, how will we be able to now apply or register if there's no, extension dates? It's now we're uncertain about our future.
The responsible people must come here, like the registrar of this institution, because he's failing to come to the students. What he's doing, he sent his lower subordinates to come and attend to the case of the students.
I'm disappointed. I took time off from work to come and do this, and as she said, at the moment this was our only option, and I didn't expect them to have a cut-off date or closing date so soon, since the matrics only got their results the other day.
Hardly a month after reopening for the new academic year, and student leaders have brought the Sunnyside campus to a standstill.
We've submitted many memorandums dating from the second week of registration, saying that these are the pending issues that are happening, but they did not take us serious. Hence we took this time to ensure that we must take it to the streets, because we've submitted over 6 memorandums which entail the same issues that we are fighting off.
Meanwhile, UNISA has apologized for the inconvenience and says it's prioritizing talks with the student leadership.
It is very unfortunate what has happened at Sunnyside campus today. Ideally, one would have preferred a situation where those students who came to campus to finalize their registrations today are allowed to do so, even when we are processing the request from the students. For that regard, we want to apologize profusely as a university for the inconvenience we have caused the students, but we want to assure everyone that this matter that has been raised around the extension is currently being processed through the university. What people need to appreciate is that decisions of this nature need first to be processed by the formal structures of the university, in this case the management committee, which is seized with this matter. And once finality has been reached, we will then communicate to the entire university community, including all the stakeholders.
UNISA's total enrollment target is about 376,000 students for this academic year. Patricia Fasach, SABC News in Pretoria.
Well, more than 200,000 students have applied to be enrolled at the University of Mpumalanga, but the university only has space for 2,800 new students. The university is one of 2 built in the democratic South Africa. Authorities say they are pleased with its growth since it opened its doors 9 years ago, when members of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Higher Education visited the university to assess the state of readiness for this 2023 academic year.
It's crunch time. Prospective students looking for university space. Not all these students will be admitted to this institution. There's a limited space.
This is my last option, and I've already applied everywhere where I could, and I wasn't accepted. So I came here hoping that I will be doing information technology.
South Africa's youngest university, University of Mpumalanga, is rapidly growing. It is starting to attract more and more students, setting a new record for applications.
We have grown because actually we've doubled, because last year we only had 107,000 applications. This year that has doubled. We have received 210,000 applications. We only have got spaces for 2,817 students.
And online registration for returning students is underway.
I just finished registering, and I'm going to look for my accommodation, and NSFAS will be funding me this year as a returning student.
The reason why I decided to come back to UMP for masters, it's because firstly it's close to home, so even if I don't have funding, at least I can be able to use the bus to come to school and do my research, so that I can be able to assist smallholder farmers.
Members of Parliament visited the institution. It is the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Innovation's oversight visit. Issues of governance, administration, safety, as well as teaching and learning were on the committee's agenda.
They are saying that there are challenges that are in the sector that we need to collectively work towards, including in NSFAS. We've also had NSFAS with us in these oversights to say, NSFAS, are you hearing what students are saying? Are you hearing what management is saying is the crisis?
Registration for first-year students start on Monday, online and in person. Walk-ins will be considered after registration is closed. Dumela Machoro, SABC News, Mbombela.
As university registration periods wrap up across the country for the first time, and returning students, the spotlight turns to admission capacity as well as funding for students looking to really secure space in institutions of their choice. One of Gauteng's biggest universities, WITS, says it's moving full steam ahead. The institution received just over 100,000 applications from prospective first-year students for the year, and available space remains tight. But SABC News senior reporter Nozintombi Mias spoke to the university's registrar, Carol Crossley.
We got well over 101,000 applications, and that is 101,000 students, applicants applied. We've got place for just over 6,000, and each of those students probably would have applied for 2 or 3 programs. So if we're looking at the applications itself, it's well over 300,000, but in terms of applicants, warm bodies, over 101,000 matriculants applied for the just over 6,000 places.
That's simply too much, though.
Very much so. But it's not a problem that's unique to WITS, and in fact the registrars talk amongst themselves, and we know that many of the universities received literally 13, 14, 15 times the number of places that they've got available. And I think it just speaks to some of the challenges we have in our post-schooling education environment in South Africa, in that many of our matriculants don't feel that they have enough options beyond university. So if they don't get into university, it's, well, what do I do now? And we certainly, as a country, we need to bolster our post-schooling education sector.
We know that the Minister of Higher Education last week had suggested that students be open to the idea of going to FET colleges. Yes. What is your thought on that?
Very much so, and we encourage that because we had well over 600,000 matriculants. As you've pointed out, many of them received matric exemption, but many of them fell just below that, but it still means that there are opportunities out there. But I think if we are going to do that, then we need to bolster our post-schooling education sector, and we certainly need to make sure that our TVETs and other options are ready and have the capacity to absorb those students.
You said such an important point, bolstering our post-high school education. What suggestions do you have on that? University is the first prize for most students. But aside from universities, FETs, I think at a school level, how can we start having conversations with kids about the reality of the situation in South Africa, their financial reality, and what is possible for them in that space?
I think it's also related to career guidance. I think it's a complex matter that certainly we can't be binary about it. We can't just say it's university or nothing. We need to, at an early age already, start talking about entrepreneurship, start talking about the skills sector in the SETAs, to look at different options, our artisans that our country desperately needs as well. So we need to boost that, we need to bolster that as well, so that students also, there isn't a stigma, unfortunately, in our country. For many of our students, there's a stigma attached. If I don't go to university, it means I'm not a success. And that's something I think as a collective we can all start addressing at school, as parents, as communities, as universities. I think there are opportunities for us to improve in that area.
Welcome back. The Week in Review with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. In news further afield, Pope Francis has met with South Sudan President Salva Kiir and his family at the presidential palace after arriving in the country yesterday. The pontiff began his visit to South Sudan with an impassioned plea to its fractious leaders to turn their backs on the violence, ethnic hatred and corruption. These social ills have stopped the world's youngest country from achieving peace and prosperity.
In a first, the Pope was conducting his visit jointly with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, leader of the Global Anglican Communion, and with Ian Greenshields, moderator of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. Catholics, Anglicans and Presbyterians all have representation among the 2/3 of this country, which is Christian. Huge crowds lined his motorcade's route into town, with many waving the flags of South Sudan, the United Kingdom, Scotland, and the Vatican.
And I wish all South Sudanese peace, happiness, joy, and everything. We deserve peace because we love. South Sudanese, we are loving people. We love each other, and we care about each other, but we don't know what's come over us. And I wish the visit of the Pope will change a lot in my country.
And the coming of the Pope has really meant like something very precious. Actually, to us, Genovese, we would want a better change for our country and for the better of our lives.
The church people, the faithful of the world, is focusing to South Sudan in order to do good, to bring us peace and to prosper.
The Pope had a private meeting with South Sudan President Salva Kiir at the presidential palace.
In April 2019, during the spiritual retreat we held at the Vatican, Your Holiness kissed our feet and asked us to remain in peace. You also told us from your heart to move forward.
Pope Francis said South Sudan was blessed with abundant natural resources, but this should be shared out, not restricted to a few through corruption. South Sudan has some of the largest crude oil reserves in sub-Saharan Africa. According to the United Nations report in 2021, staggering amounts of money have been diverted from public coffers. South Sudan's government has denied accusations of widespread corruption.
Di passi stabili di sviluppo, non di continue cadute. Presidente,
Dear President
signori vicepresidenti,
and Vice Presidents, in the name of God, of the gods to whom we prayed together in Rome, of the God who is gentle and humble in heart, the God in whom so many people of this beloved country believe now, it's time to say no more of this without ifs or buts. No more bloodshed, no more conflicts, no more violence, mutual recrimination about who is responsible for it. No more leaving your people at rest for peace. No more destruction. It is time to build. Leave the time of war behind and let a time of peace dawn.
Many South Sudanese hope the message to their politicians would not be a blunt one.
Well, that's where we're going to leave it for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow we take a look at the week ahead. Until then, from myself, Liesl Wilson, and the rest of the team, take care. It's goodbye for now.